Consider some of your favorite films. Wonder Woman, Star Wars, The Matrix. Despite their vastly different settings and characters, their patterns have captivated humanity for millennia. Today we're going to explore A Hero with a Thousand Faces. This is a book by Joseph Campbell, which at its core explores the threads that bind together some of the most important narratives in the history of our planet. As somebody who's been interested in the stories that we tell both to ourselves and others, this book has been on my reading list for a very, very long time. After finishing it a few weeks ago, I really wanted to explore some of the core tenets and principles that this influential work goes over. In his book, Campbell identified a pattern that was pervasive within the myths, going back thousands of years. He called this pattern the hero's journey. And once you see it, you'll begin to spot it in some of the most important works of our time, from ancient myths all the way to cinematic masterpieces. And going beyond that, people adopt these storytelling techniques for narratives beyond just simple fiction. So Joseph Campbell was born in 1904 in New York City. After studying extensively at Columbia University with an interest in Native American folklore and extensive traveling throughout Europe as well as the rest of the world, he really began to dive deep into mythology and stories. This led to his major insight. Underneath the different costumes and settings laid the same essential framework for transformation. When the book was published in 1949, it was primarily an academic work and ran in those circles. It wasn't until the 70s when George Lucas of Star Wars fame noted that he used the hero's journey in Campbell's work as the blueprint for Luke Skywalker's rise to power. Suddenly, Campbell's framework became Hollywood's North Star, a guide to crafting resonant, powerful narratives. Shortly before he died in 1987, he joined forces with Bill Moyers, a journalist, for a show called The Power of Myth. This was a landmark series which brought these concepts to the living rooms across America, transforming himself from intellectual researcher to pop culture icon. So with his thoughts now expressed about how humans are hardwired to experience the stories of growth and success in this basic way, let's examine how this blueprint applies to some of our most beloved stories. Now, before we jump in, it's important to recognize the general structure of the hero's journey. So, though there are about 17 parts to this, it's useful to divide it into 3 sections. The first is the departure. The departure is the severance, or the leaving what is normal, the old life to be cast aside. Next is the initiation, and that's the part where the growth, the challenges, and the mystical happen. Finally, there's the return. Now, in the return, our hero comes back to the world that he left, and in a lot of stories, this entails coming back with new knowledge to help everybody, or with success or new growth under their belt. So let's take Star Wars, for example. Luke Skywalker starts off on Tatooine. He gets his call to action when finding the message from Leia and R2-D2. The call is initially refused by his aunt and uncle. He's forced to answer this call once they die. He finds a number of mystical figures who take on the role of mentor, like Obi-Wan Kenobi and eventually Yoda. He goes through numerous trials, tribulations, and challenges with Leia and Han. Ultimately, he faces the evil Emperor and Darth Vader, and returns home with the elixir, which is represented by him coming back with knowledge and help for the rebellion. Similarly, Neo is living life as a normal person until his call to action comes in the form of Trinity, making him realize that what he's living is a lie. He meets Morpheus, the quintessential mentor figure, and is presented with the red pill or blue pill choice. Neo is transformed through training and trials, and this eventually culminates in him fighting Agent Smith, in which scene he is literally killed and reborn. His return with the elixir is a newly awakened consciousness that can be used to help humanity break free from their shackles. This narrative continues in modern cinema. In Wonder Woman, Diana is living a sheltered existence on Themyscira. That's disrupted by Steve Trevor crashing his airplane, representing a call to adventure. Now, eventually she crosses the threshold, going to the land of mortal men with Steve as her guide. Ultimately, she faces trials and tribulations, crossing another threshold as she goes into no man's land, before eventually facing her ultimate challenge in Ares. She returns with the wisdom needed to continue protecting humanity. Now, Harry Potter masterfully extends this journey over 7 volumes. Harry initially starts off in his normal world, living underneath the Dursley stairs. His call to adventure happens in the form of Hagrid and the Owl letters, bringing him to Hogwarts. He passes through the threshold of platform 9 3/4 and is brought to a world of trials and tribulations. His ultimate sacrifice in the woods, leaving him dead and ultimately redeemed and reborn at the hands of Voldemort, represents his final challenge. His return with the elixir is not just beating Voldemort, but a return with the maturity and wisdom that he lacked as a young boy. But of course, it's not just modern cinema or some of the most famous tales from the modern era. We have classic mythology too, and the histories. In the Odyssey, Odysseus starts as the king of Ithaca, his normal world. His call to adventure is one that requires him to fight in the Trojan War, a call he was not expecting nor could turn down. After employing the strategy of the Trojan horse, his true ordeal begins. Once he's left Troy, he takes 10 years of adventures, fighting numerous enemies, overcoming multiple challenges, and getting the help of numerous mentors along the way. His ultimate ordeal is that of literally going to the underworld, a journey of life and death itself. He returns, and the ordeal's not yet over. He has to retain his kingship and beat any suitors who may be pursuing his family. And this manifests as both a returned kingship as well as the wisdom of humility before the gods. With all that in mind, perhaps most remarkably is that these narratives and these patterns extend not just in fiction, but into how we craft the narratives of our own lives. The hero's journey isn't just for characters on screen. Public figures and influential people use this pattern to craft their life stories, to inspire, influence, and connect. Consider Barack Obama's meticulously crafted narrative. He begins in his normal world before the call to action is given to him in the form of community service. Through his experience both in college and as a community organizer, he gains the skills and the draw to public life. He goes through a major ordeal in the famous 2008 presidential campaign. His triumphant return with the elixir moment is returning with the idea of hope and change. And this is an incredibly effective narrative, bringing him to the highest office in the land. Steve Jobs distilled the essence of the hero's journey in his famous Stanford commencement address. He began as an ordinary man, and the call for him was to create Apple in his garage. He faced the trials and tribulations, including being fired from the company he himself created, only to return and ultimately become one of the most influential business owners and creative minds on the planet. And it's important to realize that the parallels from these narratives to Campbell's works are not coincidental. Oftentimes, they are purposely crafted to use our emotion and our psychological understanding of narrative to help these figures connect with us on a deeper level. If you pay attention closely to any election cycle, you'll see this pattern plays out across the political spectrum. The template goes the same way. It starts off by saying, I am one of you. I started off as an ordinary person. I received the call for service, and that led me down a hard, troubling road to ultimately become a servant of the people. And through this work, whether it was public service, business, entertainment, etc., I gained the wisdom and perspective that I need to now serve the people in the office I'm running for. But now we arrive at what I think is probably the most profound aspect of Joseph Campbell's narrative structure, and that is that it's not just for fictional heroes or celebrity stories. If you look closely, this narrative pattern may just be unfolding in your life right now. Think about it. What if the challenges you're facing aren't simply bumps in the road or obstacles to be surmounted, but the very things that require you to reach your fullest potential? Let's think about the quintessential rite of passage of leaving for college. A young high school student applies for college and receives an acceptance letter, the call to adventure. They step through the threshold by crossing the country to go to a place where they don't know people and have to create new ways of understanding the world. They face trials of tribulations through finding out where they fit in and dealing with challenging professors. Ultimately, they return with the elixir, not just of knowledge gained or wisdom earned by living life, but with an actual totem of understanding, a diploma or certificate. And thinking about it in this lens, is this just a mundane part of life, or is this one of the ways that we can understand the hero's journey? Consider another narrative arc that you may have heard in your own lives. A young woman has been working at the same job for 15 years, and not only is the spark gone, but she downright hates it. Volunteering at one of the local animal shelters is her call to action. She initially refuses the call because of worry about practical matters such as money or maintaining her current lifestyle. A mentor figure in the form of a family member or friend gives her the guidance and the hope that they need to pursue a different path. The trials and tribulations are the prerequisites or tough classes, certification exams, but ultimately, this person succeeds and gains that elixir, which is not just the personal growth from taking this journey, but a new job as a veterinarian. Ultimately, not just growing as a person, but living in a more authentic way. So here's some food for thought. When you start interpreting some of these parts of your life in a mythological lens, a powerful shift occurs. These seemingly insurmountable obstacles transform into a necessary part of the hero's journey. The person who arrived precisely when you needed them may have been exactly the key that you needed and was always going to come. Your most profound challenges? Not random suffering, but perhaps the very forces required to turn you into who you were meant to be. Joseph Campbell's famous directive, "Follow your bliss," takes on new meaning within this framework. It isn't about finding pleasure or hedonism. It is a call to recognize and honor your authentic calling. Viewing your life as a hero's journey gives you both the blueprint for following these steps and the courage to take that first momentous step across the threshold of change. The Hero with 1,000 Faces reveals a profound truth. Within the seemingly infinite variability of human story pulses a singular, universal heartbeat. We are all united in our journeys of transformation, and this transcends borders or geographic lines or cultural boundaries. So with that in mind, I invite you to engage with stories differently, whether they come from your favorite books or movies, TV shows, or the people that we encounter, whether publicly or privately. Observe the hero's journey underneath the surface. But more importantly, focus this mythological lens to your own existence. Ask yourself, at what stage of this journey might I be? What threshold is waiting for me to cross? What trials might be preparing me for transformation? As Campbell eloquently expressed, We have not even to risk the adventure alone, for the heroes of all time have gone before us. The labyrinth is thoroughly known. We have only to follow the thread of the hero path. And this is truly one of the most profound gifts of all. The recognition that we are not alone in our struggles. Whatever issue we're going through, whatever troubles we're trying to surmount, there has been somebody who's done it first. And whether that is a mythological hero, the characters in our favorite novels, or the people who have come before us, that trail is well blazed. The hero's journey continues, binding us together in a journey, a trek of transformation and growth. I'm Alexander Turner, and I thank you for taking this journey with me into exploring this wonderful book. And I hope you've gotten something out of this. If you have, please like, subscribe, and let me know what you'd like to hear. And as always, thanks for staying with me.